Starting, and we've started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
And tonight/today, because it's morning here in Korea, we are talking about Survivor David versus Goliath, episode 8. And what an episode it was.
Yep.
There was some crazy stuff going on in here. No secrets. I think both of us liked John, and so we're not happy to see him go exactly, except that if you're going to get voted out on Survivor, this is kind of the way to do it.
Yep.
In a big, memorable move. Especially where, in theory, it might be a situation of being taken out by the person who goes on to win, which is kind of, I don't know. Does that soften the blow, you think, or make it worse?
Well, I was just joking that it was, because wasn't it Davy's advantage that did it?
Well, it was, yeah. So it was Davy's idol.
Yeah.
But the 3 votes that voted for John that sent him out at the end were Davy, Nick, and Christian.
Right.
So those were the 3 that changed their votes. That there had to have been a plan for that. So. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying it's a little. Yes, I guess you could frame it as that. Christian, who could potentially ultimately win, is the one that did it.
Takes all credit, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it was Davy's idol that did that. If he didn't have the idol, then Christian would have been gone. Christian didn't take. So, not trying to nitpick what you're saying. But I don't think it softens the blow. I think it softens the blow because John is a good-spirited person.
Yeah. And
the style in which this went down, and he just happened to be the collateral damage of, an interesting tribal council. Mm-hmm. I think he is. Well, not happy about the outcome, happy that that's how they had to get him.
Yeah. Well, and I think a good target too, right? Like if they had to choose someone else to have their votes for and take out as a result, I think he was, from their side, he was a good choice in that regard.
Yeah, this was one of those ones where, occasionally you'll have this episode where you really wish you could go back and see like how it came to this, because everything we saw had it as, Angelina versus Christian.
Right.
And Davy's debate was, do I save Christian to get rid of Angelina? Mm-hmm. That's how it was framed. And then you come and this is a surprise that it is John that they choose instead of Angelina. So you want to hear is, did they suspect that because Angelina was the vocal target that she would potentially receive something like this and therefore wanted to have a backup? But if it was just a backup, it is interesting that they put the majority of votes on him.
Yeah.
So you wonder, did they actually decide, okay, we can win 2 ways here. If they suspect it's Angelina and they have an idol, they will play it for her, thus nullifying her votes. Angelina is somebody that they also dislike and is a target next time or the time after to continue to work with them. John, everybody likes, is a threat to win this game because of his likability. If he flies under the radar, we can take him out now when no one suspects it. I bet that's probably what it was like, but I would love to see the debate and the discussion of switching from we're targeting Angelina to we're decoying Angelina to get the idol on her if it exists, and getting rid of an actual bigger threat. Because Angelina is not a threat to win the game. And when we go to chronological, I think she pretty much put the final nail in her coffin with the opening here and how she portrayed her conversation with Elizabeth. No one trusts her at this point.
Yeah.
It was obvious what she did. She didn't own up to it. Her damage control was bad. Right. She cannot. I would go out on a limb and say she cannot win this game.
Yeah. Well, to be sure, it's an example of something where the only way she could possibly win would be to do something really extraordinary, because as of right now, she's in a hole. So she would need to do something really impressive. Now, we can't rule out that could happen, but it's hard to imagine what that would require.
Right. Because what ended up happening is, they believed that she was fishing for jury votes, and that had the backfire of everyone who is going to be on the jury does not want to vote for her.
Right.
So how she's going to win back votes, even if she does a great job protecting herself and getting to the end, the level of extraordinary that would have to be to erase this, not just hole she's in, but this perception that they have of her, is going to be nearly impossible.
Well, like, the only thing that you could theoretically imagine is once you get to the point where everyone sort of agrees that she can't win, then there's still enough time left in the season for a potential underdog, retakes control sort of narrative. But it's not clear that she would be capable of pulling that off, especially since there are so many other good players right now.
Yes. But John having been one of them up until this point.
Yeah, well, and John, I think, going back to why they target him, another thing that he had demonstrated, which makes him dangerous, is his ability to be completely at ease with saying, yes, I like Christian a lot. He's a friend. I care about him. I like him, and I think he is a threat, so I'm going to vote him out. And to just be very at ease with that mindset. And that's dangerous.
Yes. So ultimately, I think we agree this was quite an episode. I was pleasantly surprised, as much as I liked John. Again, I know I've kind of reiterated, like, I wanted to see how they got to it, that this was ultimately their decision, because this is not how the narrative was stacking up. It looked like, now we know they're smarter than this, but if you just took the episode at face value, it looked like what they were setting up was a Christian versus Angelina showdown, and a choice as to which people would use their idol. And what it felt like they were going to do is, okay, if Davey decides, then it's up to who had the other idol?
Well, Dan played the idol for Angelina.
Right. So, but Dan is then put in a position, knowing that, Christian is safe. Does Dan give up his idol for Angelina? Is she worth saving? That's what it was set up as, which would then lead, again, if you took the episode at face value, it would lead you to believe that there would then be a situation where there are no votes. Because the way we were seeing it is, Christian versus Angelina, Christian's getting nullified. Then Dan's in this tough position, and it almost felt like the Davids were rolling the dice that Dan would not protect her. And he does. If everything were taught at that point from the edit, then all of the votes would have been for Christian or Angelina, and thus all nullified.
Yeah, so I thought that's what was going to happen until the first John vote. I think the producers were skillful in presenting that as the apparent outcome right up until that first John vote shows up.
Yep. And again, kudos to Christian and Davey, or whoever, came up with this, or Nick, to blow that open and essentially, and this is, again, what I thought it was. I thought they would have gone 3-2 once I saw the first John vote. I thought it was going to be 3 Angelina, 2 John, in that they still would have rather gotten rid of Angelina, and if had Dan not used his idol. But this was so genius, because no matter what, John goes home, and Dan is put in this tough position. And if Dan doesn't choose Angelina, well, then Angelina is going to go on this warpath on him about, why didn't you save me? Even if she manages to stick in the game, and you still get rid of a bigger threat. If Dan does use it, he burns an idol on someone who didn't even need it, and you're left with a person that no one trusts in the game that you could then go get people rallied around at a later date.
Yeah.
So
Well, boy, you have to. I'm kind of I keep thinking of phrases that are like to give credit to someone, and I'm kind of wanting the opposite. For Dan, admittedly, tough choice, right? Like we saw him earlier in the episode struggling with the idea of whether it was worth one of his idols to save Angelina.
Right.
And so, unfortunately for him, kudos rescinded for him that he managed to make it super obvious that he was still conflicted right up until when he stood up to do it. He made her ask him twice, sitting there around that tribal council, going, right. I really don't want to. And she's like, please, my God, Dan, help. And then he's finally, fine. And it's like,
so they end up with ultimately like the best possible case scenario. They got rid of John in a truly a blindside. He did not expect to be a target.
Mm-hmm.
And a potential threat later down the game because of his likability and under the radar. They got what they wanted with Angelina being frustrated with her other people and further, putting a wedge in that split because Dan took so long to give her the idol. Mm-hmm. She's still the whole idea that she might go on the warpath against the Goliaths because they don't support her. Like that still possibility still exists.
Yeah.
And Dan burned an idol. So they were expecting it to be one way or the other in that the wedge would be drawn because he didn't support Angelina. But since he only half-heartedly did it, they still get that benefit while also losing the idol.
Right. So I think what we know must be true is that Davey, Nick, and Christian at least had definitively arranged that Davey was going to play his idol and not steal a vote.
Correct. Yeah, Nick definitely didn't go against it and they didn't just roll like, oh, I guess we'll just lose Christian and I won't play a vote. Right. That obviously Nick is smarter enough to not let that happen.
Well, and I think there was Davey had expressed his concern earlier that nobody knows he has this idol, when we saw him talking about it. And obviously, if there's a way to save Christian without using his idol, he would rather do that. But it does seem at this time like if they're going to take out Christian now, then their plan is to just pick off all the Davids, which is obviously bad news for him. He can't let the tide turn that way. And it's worth his idol to stop that. Correct,
because had they only done the steal a vote, it would have been tied, right?
Well, yeah. So no, it was going to be 7-5. So if one of those 7 makes it 6, so I guess it would have been a tie. And so that's not good enough.
He would have taken the vote, eliminated a Christian, and then put in an Angelina in the theory, and it would have been 5-5, Christian versus Angelina.
Right.
However, again, why I think this is smart. Number one, the tie is not good for them because take all the other factors out. You're now rolling the dice to do you go to a revote then without the steal a vote? I don't know what happens if you steal a vote and then get a tie.
I think probably the tie rules would be the same as if there was a natural tie, I would think.
Now a revote.
Well, so I'm trying to remember because they established different rules, I think, last season, right? And so I don't think it's come up this season.
Oh yeah, because then they made it more dramatic, like they went straight to rock.
It's like no, I think it went straight to fire making challenge, right?
Straight to fire making. Okay, yeah. So
although in this instance, a tie, like if it had worked out to be a tie with no valid votes.
Well, no, I'm going to no, because I don't think there would have been a situation where they would have used both pieces.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, but that gets me to my next point is, okay, so whatever it is, whether it goes straight to rocks, goes straight to fire making, or goes to a revote, all the different things that can happen in a tie. It doesn't matter which one it is. You're still with a steal a vote, you're still putting up a piece to chance that you're going to turn the tide.
Mm-hmm.
And further to that, if you steal the vote and make a tie, the steal a vote is announced, right? So
I think it's announced after the fact. Like the person who's using it gets to cast their vote twice when they vote. and the person who votes doesn't know that their vote is being stolen? I don't know. I can't remember, actually. I think that it's come up before, like not this season, but when they've done this before. No, I think you might be right that the steal a vote is announced before they go up to vote.
Yeah, he has to say, I'm going to use my advantage and steal a vote. I'm going to take so-and-so's vote.
Yeah.
Which then gives Dan an opportunity, once the votes are concluded, to still give Angelina his idol. You could have voted for a tie. Angelina gets the idol, and Christian goes. And then Davey still has to pull out his idol in order to save Christian.
Carl does still have the idol nullifier, though. So that would possibly have been something that could be done. But I agreed. I think, honestly, the way it played out is really the best case scenario, and good for them that it worked.
Correct, because even with the idol nullifier, you might have to use the steal a vote and the idol nullifier, so therefore burning 2 advantages to get to a tie.
Yeah.
Which then puts it at risk. This was the only way to make sure, and so to Davey's credit for recognizing that and not wanting to protect it, like, this made more sense than to go down even more people.
Right.
Whether it be by, fire making or idol or whatever. Because the worst thing that could have happened is that they use the steal a vote, they use the idol nullifier, and then they lose the fire making, and they're still down 2 people now, or 3 people now, and they've burned 2 advantages, and all that's happened is that Davey still has an idol.
Yeah.
It's better to Davey use an idol, stop the tide, turn it, get rid of a threat, and maintain 2 advantages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And burn an idol on the other side.
And it all hinged, of course, on the idea of nobody knowing that there was an idol available to be played for Christian, right? No one on the other side, because then they could have split the votes and still taken out someone on the David tribe, right? But the way it worked out, because they didn't know, it pretty much guaranteed, no matter how the Goliath idol was played, that someone on the Goliath tribe would go home.
Right. So once again, there's a reinforcement for there is the discipline to not tell people about your idol until it is necessary is important.
Yeah. So what we had is expert play from the 3 guys in question here, because we needed Nick to be the one to realize what's going on in terms of the planned blindside for Christian, right?
Yep.
And to let Christian know and persuade him that it was that dire, because Christian didn't seem to be that. Oh, he didn't realize it was that bad until Nick shared that with him. I think Nick only knew because, the splintering of the Strike Force Alliance, they were trying to reassure Nick, but ended up alienating him instead. And so he goes to Christian, lets him know how dangerous it is. And then, of course, they absolutely needed Davey's idol. And recognizing that it was smart to play it here for someone else instead of saving it for himself. I mean, that's... he had to make that call, and I think he made the right one, but that's, that would be a tough decision. And so the 3 of those guys, and probably aided by the 2 that voted for Angelina as well, I think they were probably brought into the plan, but those 3 guys pulled off something really cool here.
Yep.
All right, so let's jump back to the beginning, and we started with something you mentioned already a little bit, which is the Angelina telling the camera, yeah, when I talked to Elizabeth, it was 100% jury management, and I got caught, and so now I have to try to convince them it was something else. But what that just means is that, like, any sort of credit that I wanted to give her at all last week about it being just a sincere emotional moment is, rescinded. I mean, I don't blame her for trying to do jury management, but it's all the less excusable for her to blame anyone else for what happened. Because it really wasn't about helping Elizabeth in any way.
Nope.
And unfortunately for her, she tries to tell another version of the story that puts a more positive light on it, but no one really believes her. And at that point, Dan kind of talks about wanting to get rid of her. But I think he is like, I like him in some respects, and certainly ending up with two idols from being proactive is strong, but he doesn't seem to look very far ahead from a strategic perspective. Like, obviously, he comes around to the idea that getting rid of Angelina now doesn't make any sense for their alliance. But for him to even really be talking about that before the time comes for it is, it's one thing to just say, we're staying Goliath strong right now for the numbers, but I don't trust her anymore, and she's gone as soon as we don't need her.
Right.
But for him to say anything resembling she's the next target, it's like you're not thinking this through very thoroughly.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So.
Even though ultimately it kind of blew up, I want to give Mike some credit for his play in some regards, because obviously things didn't go his way. But we start, early on in the episode here too, we also have Mike and Christian talking about how Angelina's been defanged, and they seem to be mutually satisfied with their plan for the whole strike force and all of that. And so it seems like Mike is able to persuade Christian everything's still going according to plan. But as frustrating, because I liked the idea of the strike force, it was frustrating to have someone on that group decide not to do it after all.
Right.
But put yourself in his shoes and look at the two groups of people. Which of those groups do you actually want to proceed further in the game with if you want to win?
Okay. No, all right. You've started to convince me. I strongly question Mike's, waffling here on the strike force.
Mm-hmm. I kind of thought about it a little bit like how Alec was trying to have it both ways as long as possible, which is reasonable. I mean, as long as you don't overplay that. Mm-hmm. But I think that Mike was kind of maybe in the same boat, but then when it came down to it, he's looking at Christian and he's thinking he could win. And we need to not let him win. And obviously that is completely impossible to reconcile with staying in the strike force.
Right.
And okay. So I think he's looking at the people on the strike force. You got Alec, you got Nick, Allison, Gabby, and Christian. And he's looking at them. By definition of being on the strike force, they're the ones that are taking action, making moves, making alliances across the old tribe boundaries, doing interesting things, and all of them are relatively likable. I mean, I don't think we have a lot of unlikable people left, but then compare that to the Goliath tribe.
Angelina,
Well, and even her, I don't know that she's unlikable so much as it's just she kind of got caught.
I guess what I think when I think about when you were discussing unlikable, I mean like the social aspect of it.
Yeah.
Can they sway jury votes? She has put herself in a position where she has the most difficult time. Everybody else especially on that strike force, and yes, tribe-wide, we are now into a bunch of people who can all work the jury because they have that capability, with the exception of Angelina.
Right.
And, and potentially, and Gabby's also a little, she is likable, but I don't think that socially she would have the ability to win votes off of a jury.
Well, it's interesting because Mike is fairly harsh in his assessment later, talking to Alec, basically trying to talk Alec into the idea of saying, look, the strike force was a fun idea, but here's why it's actually in our better interest to, just stay with the Goliath strong here. Because I think from Mike's perspective, he's looking ahead to say, which group of people can I stand out in as being the smartest player? And he thinks he has a better shot with the Goliath group.
Yes. He does also talk about Gabby and questions her commitment. And this is, unfortunately for her, this is that is part of what her issue when she was having all of those like anxiety things in the last couple episodes. This is part of what it gave Mike an opening to use something other than just Christian will win. It's also Gabby is hard to trust that she's going to be in this because she is not really felt committed to us because, and because of all those other things that she has done. And, we knew that, we didn't know it was going to play out like this, but we talked about that when Gabby kept saying it. Like, we thought it would be more of when does Christian get tired of having to like keep bringing her back. But what ended up happening is that, her feeling of distance from the group was seen as distance from the group and perceived by Mike as not committed to the group.
Yeah.
And therefore allowed him to use that in addition to his, idea of, well, I can't beat Christian. It's going to be tough to beat Alec. It's going to be tough to beat Allison,
Right. So even though I think in sort of the narrative sense of the season, this move paints Mike as a little bit of a villain because he's turning against what is shaping up to be sort of a golden boy in Christian, right? I mean, it's like, I don't want to overstate it, but I guess when I said at the beginning, what happened to John was done by the person who might go on to win the game, you knew who I was talking about.
Right.
Even though you were disagreeing with me that it was Christian that did it.
Right. I wasn't disagreeing with you. He was the guy who could potentially win the game. I was disagreeing with whether he was the one that you give all the credit to, which.
But so it illustrates my point, though, that I think that especially in terms of, we talk about, editing and how they build narratives over a season, right? I mean, it's looking good for Christian right now. It doesn't guarantee anything, but that's kind of where things stand at the moment, especially after this one. This one kind of helps it. But
the thing that's really hard for Christian is that he has gone from a discussion of a threat to win the game to we have decided that he is a threat to win the game.
Yeah. And not only that, but we lost someone already trying to take him out. And so now.
Right. And so while in the challenges, like, yes, he is a master of the puzzle ones. Any of the endurance and physical ones, he is a little bit of a disadvantage. Like, he doesn't do as well with them. He's not incompetent at them.
Well, I mean, there's been a couple where he went out almost right away.
There have been a couple of that, but there's been others that he's done okay with. I mean, he's capable, but he's not a strike. There's a likelihood that he is going to be vulnerable again at some point.
Yeah.
And at some point he runs out of, whether it's advantages or alliances. Like, I mean, he'll run out of bullets. That's the big risk for him.
Yeah, he no longer has any ability to go back under the radar. He is an obvious target from here on out.
Yes, definitively. And that's his biggest challenge in winning the game, is that even his people who are working with him, if you're Davey or Nick, you're also wondering when the right opportunity is because you don't really want to go up against him at the end.
Right.
And that's going to be a very, very tough hill for Christian to climb. So while he has the talent to win this game, it's still a tough road.
Right. Yeah, he's got a lot of work still ahead of him for sure. And other people who are also good that he's up against.
This is I mean, for a season with all new players, there's a pretty good cast of people who really get what's going on. They did a really good job of casting this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. Like for everyone who might have a weakness here or a weakness there, they're strong in other areas.
Yep.
Like, even as much of a hole as Angelina's put herself in, she put herself there by playing hard.
Yeah, she went a little too hard too fast.
Yeah.
Because like you pointed out, when I put her in the unlikable column, I kind of backed off it and said it wasn't the unlikable part, it was just the deficiency in the social game at this point.
She overplayed her hand in a way that was pretty crippling.
Yes. But she's not an unlikable person. She's clearly, driven, smart, gets it, just moved a little fast on this one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't get another chance after that.
Nope.
Yeah. So in any event, let's see. The other stuff that we got before the reward challenge was Nick and Davey deciding to go idol hunting. And I thought it was interesting that they found a clue that was just in the form of a picture. That's kind of neat.
Yep.
And then, of course,
I had a lot of fun too with Nick, like pulling up being like, it's like one of those 80s t-shirts, like, because that's exactly what it was meant to evoke was, that retro t-shirt graphic of,
like the palm tree and the sort of tiered sunset.
Yep.
Yeah, it was good.
The sort of generic anywhere that could have a palm tree. I think my dad had one for La Jolla in California, but that probably same thing existed in Daytona and every other kind of touristy beach town probably had that T-shirt in the 80s. And so totally. It's funny that he not only was that what they chose, but he kind of had fun with it.
Yeah, it's look, I got an iron-on T-shirt.
Yep.
So that was fun. And I continue to feel every time Davey gets stuff to do that I enjoy him. Especially this whole bit here of him and Nick are going to go try to find this clue, and they find it, but it's an inconvenient location. And Carl shows up and kind of just sort of volunteers himself to join whatever they're doing. And they're like, oh, that's not optimal timing, but sure. Okay. There are worse people that it could have been. But then Davey deciding to essentially be a distraction by playing around with the stick out on the beach, and it worked.
It was so funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was great. I loved that. I really did. And then good for them too, that, they find, what they were looking for, which was not an idol, but it was, and I suspect it wasn't an idol because all three, there were 3 idols already in possession of people, so they weren't going to have, that might actually have also been why there wasn't something at the merge feast. It's because there are still 3 idols in play. But in any event,
No, good point.
Yeah. In any event, they find the steal a vote advantage, and we are reminded at that time that Carl has the idol nullifier, which I had actually forgotten about. And then Davey's own idol. And I was just thinking about wow, those 3 things together, if they can play them smart, that's pretty unstoppable. Yep. And sure enough, in this instance, they only needed 1, but that means they still have an idol nullifier and a steal a vote, which especially in combination could be very powerful.
Right. And considering that they are, if everything stays as is, they are still down a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was 7-5. That was.
Yeah, it was 7-5, and so now it's 6-5, right?
Right. So it's 6-5. They have 2 of those. Where's the other idol? Oh,
Dan had 2.
Yeah, we just played 2. I was going to say, I know Dan still had 1. I forgot that we played 2 here. Mm-hmm. So 2 idols go back into circulation now, most likely, this early in the game.
Yeah.
So there's a place where Christian, who is smart and forward thinking, probably knows that, and I didn't take any notes or recall the scenes from next time. It probably showed him doing that.
Well, next time, Kara splits from Dan, and then I didn't write out anything else actually. That was the only thing.
Whether she should split from Dan, I'm not 100% sure that's what's going to happen because I don't trust those things.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That said, I'm not sure. Dan, I think, is, although, you know, he deserves credit for finding 2 idols, I think he did let it make him cocky, and he has a problem with being condescending to people.
Yes.
And so that's going to hurt him. And it definitely hurts anyone who's tying their fortunes to him.
Yes.
But in any event, we'll see how that goes. Then let's see, we have, you know, I guess we did have the bit too that was like the first clue to Christian that Mike not be totally with them, because Mike is basically expressing to Christian that he thinks Gabby might not be on board. And Christian kind of reacts to that to the camera of like, where's that coming from? Is he maybe projecting? You know, or is he telling me, he's trying to sell me on the idea that someone else is untrustworthy in order to sort of justify his own decision to not be with us?
Yep.
Yeah. So the reward challenge was a dozen pizzas for the winning team. Pretty great reward. I liked this challenge a lot. Just the, you know, the endurance element of it, but adding the strategy of being able to shift the bags around. So like you could if you could hold it up with one hand for a minute, you could put your other arm down and shake it out a little bit, and you shift.
Or you could be a cocky jerk and take 3 bags and think you're invincible and lose the challenge for everyone.
Yeah, you can also do that. You can also do that. You know,
I mean, it's a small thing, but prior to the challenge, I was somewhat amused by you get to all share 1 slice of pizza.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny, and I thought it was great that I remember who it was at the end who was like, "I'm good with all crust." You know? So they were able to just like all eat it and leave him with crust. It was again small but just fun.
Yeah, no, I like that too. I think it was actually Dan that was on the far end.
Yeah, and he declared that he's fine with just crust, so everybody else can eat the other part of it.
Well, it's like you would rather have like a big bite of crust than a tiny little bite of something something else. Yeah. So that was fun. We had the fun little moment from Mike at the end where Probst is like, "I got nothing for you. Head on back." And Mike's like, "Well, we've got nothing for you either, Jeff."
Yep.
Let's see. So we came back from a reward challenge with Mike's sort of monologue about his decision-making process from
he has nothing for us too.
Oh, puppy. Mike talking about people getting distracted by the rewards and taking their mind off the game. And I kind of added in parentheses, easy to say when you didn't win the reward. But in any event, he is starting to be concerned that in trying to cooperate with the Strike Force plan, not only does that further the game of Christian, who he sees as a big threat, but it also presents a possibility that the Goliaths are surrendering their current numbers advantage, at which point the tables could be turned. And, you know, I mean, those are not unrealistic concerns. And so even though it was disappointing to me because I liked the idea of the Strike Force Alliance, from his perspective, I can see where he would come to that position. Now that said, he approaches Alec to start talking up Christian as a threat, and says the way he puts it is, Carl and Davy won't mount some insurrection, which I thought was a little bit ironic, just given that we had seen, Carl and Davy and Nick finding those different advantages and talking about their idols and stuff and plotting about what they might do. And I was just like, it's kind of funny actually that he's like, oh, they're not going to plot some insurrection. It's like, we just saw them doing that.
Right. Well, Christian is sort of the mastermind and the social lever of all of that.
He's kind of the heart,
right.
in some ways too. Yeah.
But that's kind of, I mean, and to be fair, like I think he's kind of the leader of that, and like you said, the heart, and part of why they work so hard to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, of the three advantages that exist, it is those three guys who in that group.
Mm-hmm.
Those three guys have them. They have the vote steal, the idol nullifier, and the idol. Christian doesn't have any of them. So you're right. It's amusing that Mike's kind of like dismissing them when they have all of the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's some fun stuff there. Alec is concerned about not wanting to blow up the Strike Force plan and then be locked into the Goliaths, but Mike then kind of approaches the other Goliaths with this idea of taking out Christian and basically sells everyone on it. And Angelina is like, that's what I was trying to tell everybody last time and nobody would listen to me. So, but now that Mike comes up with the same plan, now it's a good idea.
Yes. And it's a fair criticism. I mean, that's a thing that happens a lot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is. But yeah.
So this one I'm not too hard on her for, because this is that is a legitimate thing that people deal with all the time, even outside of the game.
Well, and I think it's absolutely what happened here too. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, they take Mike more seriously than they take her.
Right.
So and obviously things are always complex, but I think there's definitely a real piece of that here. But in any event, she is also not super happy about being the decoy, although she does ultimately say, I'm not saying no. I just would like there to be some other plan if we can think of one. And unfortunately they couldn't. So, that just kind of puts her in a position of having to be really trusting of people that she would rather not.
Yep.
So the immunity challenge was another just endurance one. And it was really interesting that it came down at the end to Angelina and Dan, just because obviously if Angelina had won, that could have really upset some things, because it would prevent them from using her as the decoy. So then what?
Yeah, I was kind of torn here, because while Angelina is the person that I am rooting for the least who was left at this time, part of me is rooting for her to be available and hope that something can happen to get rid of her. And again, not because I dislike her, that's why I wanted to position as rooting for the least.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it would have been interesting, because of the way they had this decoy thing set up, how they were going to play it if she did win immunity.
Yeah.
Like,
it would be much harder to blindside anyone on the Davids.
Mm-hmm.
But, so that would have been interesting.
It would have been. So the way the Strike Force interacted, even though Mike had sort of alluded to them that was probably over, there would have been some conversations then, because all of a sudden, like, the easy, Goliath target goes away. So I was torn. Ultimately, obviously the way the episode turned out, it was amazing. So
yeah. But so there was some good tension there in the challenge, because it seemed possible that she might win and change everything that had been planned so far. but as it happened, Dan eventually did win. So Mike talks about hoping that the dysfunctional Goliath family can keep their egos in check to take out Christian.
Call out that. Sorry, excuse me. Even though Dan won, he had to win. He had to put a little cocky flair at the end of it. Like there's just this. There's something building with him slowly but surely that really is like I think you identify. Like it's just his confidence level has turned into cocky, and it's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
So he goes through this whole thing, and like he's struggling and hurting and sweating and all these kind of things. And so is everybody. And then he wins, and he manages to pull off like this little move where he like flips the ball in the air and like tosses the thing like, oh, this was so easy for me. And it's like, it was unnecessary. It was just, it didn't feel like a fun victory celebration. It felt like an unnecessary, like I'm better than you celebration.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really notice that. I did notice the two of them hug afterwards. I mean, it's easy for him to be gracious, but they, and I don't know. I mean, I didn't notice that aspect of it, but I think we're agreed in the general concept, which is that the cockiness that he's displayed recently is off-putting.
Yes, and I guess maybe it's because maybe I'm a little more in tune to that, like having like the fact that I work in the sports business and celebrations and excessive celebrations and like what borders on that is like a big kind of hot topic like in our industry, and touchdown dances versus like whatever, like, and so I've started to kind of pick out like what feels like it's in good faith and a fun celebratory moment versus a negative like kind of in your face, like I'm better than you celebratory moment. And his move there didn't feel like an in good faith celebrating. It felt cocky. Like, so even these little things that he's starting to do. And so I guarantee someone else on that tribe, on the Goliath tribe, felt that way too. And while they ultimately,
we know Angelina did.
Well, we know Angelina did, but we know that he's also outside of like all of his actions are starting to add up. There's this, he's starting to get to that like tipping point of lots of little things, the butterfly wings in China thing.
Yeah.
You keep doing little things like this. Eventually people are going to turn on you.
Well, that might be why maybe the Dan and Kara split may be real. Because we've seen her a couple of times now talk about him being either overconfident or paranoid in various times.
Yeah. So I didn't want to dismiss that it could be very real. I also just don't necessarily trust when the previews show.
I agree there.
Versus actual actions,
you never know. They are very good at presenting situations that turn out to not be like that at all.
Right.
But we did get the whole bit with Dan trying to stabilize Angelina, make sure that she's good with the plan, even though it puts her as decoy. And she feels like he's being disingenuous. And then it's proven that he's disingenuous because he immediately goes to Alec and Kara to complain about her. So it's like, yeah. So, I mean, he is being a team player in the sense that he's trying to ensure that she doesn't disrupt the plan. But we see that from an emotional standpoint, it is disingenuous. It's just a team strategy thing.
Yep.
We also had John talking about being bummed to lose Christian, but recognizing him as a threat and predicting a hashtag brochacho blindside, which is amazing in hindsight.
Because it was.
Yes, exactly. And it's one of the very rare times that those little hashtag blindside things turned out to be worth anything. Let's see. So at this point, Alec doesn't want to risk going against the Goliaths, and yet he decides to tell Nick about the Christian blindside. I think he is maybe still hoping, like, he's still trying to have it both ways. And he extends a very risky hand to Nick there. Because even as he says in the conversation, if you, Nick, went to all the Goliaths and told him that I just told you that, I would be in big trouble. So I'm going to trust that you not do that because I like you and I want to try to help you go further in the game. And so Nick handles that well by not using it against Alec, but nonetheless going and telling Christian that he's in danger. But at that point, they're stuck. You know, they're saying like, okay, even if we know, what can we do about it? And that's where they start having their discussions. And the plan that they ultimately carry out is hatched, even though we don't get to see it being developed.
And God,
huh?
It's so golden, that plan.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It was great.
And so I want to just, back up to what you were saying earlier. Yes, Alec took a huge risk.
Mm-hmm.
I think this will pay off for him. I think he has walked both sides so well, but it will all depend on what he does next. He's now, he hasn't been exposed because Nick protected his privacy on this one, but we're running out of people, and ultimately Nick's going to have to, or not Nick, Alec's going to have to make a decision like where he's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think he rode this to the razor's edge, and it worked for him because his information allowed them to craft this plan, make this decision, and save, sort of their leader, heart, whatever you want to call it. But if he votes against them, they will lightning turn on him at this point.
Well, it's interesting though that he does still have Angelina in the sense that if the Goliaths are no longer going to be Goliath strong and be willing to vote out another of their own, who is the biggest target there? Is it Alec or is it actually Angelina?
Or do Alec and Angelina join the Davids to take out threats from the Goliath tribe?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because both of them have obviously Mike is willing to go that way. John was, but is gone. Angelina is not going to be super thrilled with the Goliaths right now and will be open to other options. Mm-hmm. Alec is clearly open to working with them. If there's an incentive for him.
Yeah. So
now all of a sudden, like you've got some cracks over there, and it outside of just the strike, and you still have Allison, right? Was in the strike force.
Yeah.
So you still have the ability to pull her back in. Mm-hmm. Say, hey, you know what? Like, let's revisit this. But Mike was the one that wasn't on board. What if, because we know Angelina can't win and is on the outs, we bring her in? Mm-hmm. And from the Davids' perspective, that's genius because they know Angelina is expendable at any time and can't win.
Yeah.
And from the Goliaths, they're like, well, Alex kind of at this point where he's got to make a decision. And Allison was already kind of with them. There's a lot of stuff available to them.
I am
for now.
Yeah. There are so many different ways it could go, and it is absolutely why, in addition to just some of the expert play and fun surprises we had in this episode, I'm very happy to see what I think is probably the final nail in the coffin of the idea that the Goliaths are just going to stay together and pick off the Davids, and that's that.
Right.
I think that's pretty much impossible now.
Yeah. The only way that could happen is that they would be dead set in that, and the Davids would be dead set in not doing that. Mm-hmm. Davids would use their advantages, and well, actually no, because the Davids' advantages now with only one idol, like they could, if everything is played next time with stealing votes, idol nullifiers, David's could, if it came down to another head-to-head. So Goliath, even though they don't know all the advantages, they've got to start to suspect that with a one-person advantage, this is not a pick off the Davids thing anymore.
No.
Especially
not, yeah.
Proven themselves plenty capable of. I mean, if they were able to orchestrate this thing with a 7-5 advantage, a 6-5 is definitely not safe.
No, definitely not.
Right, and everybody's going to start looking and say, okay, what's next? And so the strike force may be revived. I don't know that Mike gets involved. They may try something else because Christian's smart and he may say, you know what, our liability in strike force was Gabby and Mike. So let's do something else. Let's take the three of us. Let's go find 3 other people from the Goliaths. Let's Alex obviously helping us. So let's take him. Well, who are the other 2 that Alex can bring along? What's the new 6? I mean, there's so many possibilities that it's going to be a lot of fun.
I feel like Christian would like to take Gabby to the end, though.
He does want to, but at some point he's going to realize she's a liability. I just feel like that.
See, I mean, you may be right. I'm just thinking he can always trust her to have his back. And against him, she won't win.
Correct. Those are 2 very true things. Yeah.
Plus, at the same time, there's that you can add to that just the fact that he likes her and there's a loyalty fund, sense there.
Yep.
So bringing her to the end, I feel like there's a lot of reasons why he would be willing to take risks in other areas in order to further that plan. But we'll see.
Yeah.
So I think most of the rest of it we kind of talked about already because we sort of front loaded the episode with all of that end game strategy stuff. I think, because like none of the stuff that was said in tribal council means anything because everyone was keeping their real plan secret. So none of that stuff means any actual. Like, there's nothing to that. Like, the only thing that actually has any real ramifications is Dan hesitating so long before playing the idol for Angelina. I mean, he did eventually play it, but we can also imagine the Dan we've seen in the last couple of episodes lording that over her in a way that she would be very unhappy with.
Yep.
And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, so... that was a thrilling tribal council for sure. And it's sad to see John go, but it's hard to argue with how it happened.
Yep.
And it was nice that, he's a pro wrestler. He gets it, so
yeah,
no hard feelings. It's all fun. Yeah. He continues to be a very likable guy. And so next time, well, and I love the exchange as he's leaving. The Christian's like, "Can I still be comptroller?" That was pretty great.
That is funny.
Yeah, and the answer, of course, yes. Yeah. So I think that covers this episode, and by the time next week comes around, I will be back in the States for a little while. So.
Yay!
So we'll plan on recording for next week, and we'll figure out what time makes sense over the holiday weekend. But in the meantime, we'll be back for more talking about Survivor next week. And if you follow any of my D&D content, I'm going to be streaming a game shortly after we finish this recording.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. So you can check my Twitter, but that'll be streaming on Twitch instead of YouTube Live like this. But in any event, we'll talk to you guys next week.
Next week.